Okay, so I wanted to make a quick how-to for embedding a UI scroll view into a view controller because I think there's a lot of misleading information out there, a lot of Stack Overflow articles on it, and a lot of confusion on how to do it in Storyboard. So what I'm going to do is step number one, get a UI scroll view and just pop it in there. Now I don't want it to actually take up um, the whole space. So I'm going to go ahead and make this a little bit smaller. And I think this gives you a good idea of how to do this if you want to put either a toolbar on the bottom or a navigation bar or whatever, something that's not scrolling with the rest of the content. So go ahead, I added that into the storyboard, and now I'm going to add what's commonly referred to as a content view, which is just a regular view, and I'm going to put that in the scroll view. And before I get too far into this, I'm going to change the color of the scroll view so that we can just see how it's working. Right now my main view is gray, so I'll go ahead and I'll make this like pinkish magenta type color, and I'll make the view yellow. And that way I can just see, get a little better idea of how it's working and whether or not it's working. Now, I know I'm going to want this view to actually be a little bit bigger, right? Because I'm thinking I'm going to have some content in there. That's the whole point of having the scroll view. So I'm going to go ahead and make this around 500. So now that I have this basic setup, we can see this this view is inside of the scroll view. We'll go ahead and call it a content view. So we already have that. We have that in here. And what I'm going to do now is set up all the constraints that'll make it work. So the first thing I need to do, or the first thing I like to do, is make sure that my content view has an actual explicit size. Now, if you're using a UI image view, an image view has, I believe, an intrinsic size, which is the size of the image. You wouldn't have to do this. But since I have a blank content view and a blank content view doesn't have any size, I'm going to go ahead and add the constraints of width and height. And I'm going to say OK. So the first thing, or the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to describe this window, the scroll view dimensions, by adding the constraints from the view. So in this case, what I'm actually going to do, I'm going to select the scroll view. I'm going to go into the pin menu. And I'm just going to go ahead and add all these constraints, hit add 4 constraints, and now my scroll view is defined in my view. The next step, and this is where it gets really confusing, is I need to add constraints. I need to pin my content view in the scroll view. Normally when you pin something, if I were to go through and pin the content view into the scroll view, I would expect the content view to change size according to those constraints. But the thing that everybody gets confused on is for a UI scroll view, Apple has repurposed the constraints in this case just so that the UI scroll view knows the size of the content view. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to go over here. I'm going to set everything to 0. Okay. I'm going to add those 4 constraints. And we can see that this is a little bit off. We can see that it's meant to move up, and that's actually, that's what I want it to do. It's just that the frame doesn't reflect that, so I'll go ahead and update the frame. Now it reflects it. Notice this whole time I had the preview, whatever this preview assistant editor on the right, and that just helps you to make sure that the layout is working okay. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to run this, switch over to my simulator, and I'm going to see that right here I have a working scroll view. Having that magenta background makes it a little bit easier to see what I'm doing. And that's it. And the thing to remember is the content view, when you pin it into the scroll view, all the constraints need to be 0. And it's not going to actually resize the content view. It's just going to make sure that the scroll view knows the size of the content view. And then the other thing, especially when you're using a content view with nothing in it, or if you're using something other than an image view, is you need to make sure that this content view has a explicit size. To give you an example, if I didn't have an explicit size, had I forgotten to do that, then I would have gotten this error, which says scroll view has ambiguous content width and height, right? In which case I could have just gone in here and added it. I'd been like, oh, okay, I know that's a problem. Add width and height. I'm good to go. All right, well, I hope this clears some stuff up for you. I know there was so much confusion on this on Stack Overflow, but at least if you're working with Xcode 6.4-ish and Swift 1.2, hopefully this helps you out.